So thank you all very much for joining today's Employers Network meeting. This is all about the Employment Rights Act, which is and has been a thing for quite a while, but it's all starting to happen now. Usually the Employers Network meeting, which is still quite new, is an exclusive thing for our HR service subscribers, but because this is such a huge change in employment legislation, we've opened this up to everyone to join us today. We have put 90 minutes aside for this. The session itself will probably go for about an hour. Then we've got plenty of time for questions. So we might finish a wee bit earlier. It's not going to go any further than 90 minutes. It's just to give us enough time for you to ask your questions. It's possible that we might say we don't know, because there are still a lot of unknowns with this, even though it's all starting to happen now. But we'll try our best, as always. So some housekeeping to get us started. As I've said, and you'll have seen, we're recording today's session. So the session will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for everyone to watch later. If someone hasn't been able to make it today, they can catch up. We're going to stop recording when we get to the Q&A portion. And we've set aside, as I said, plenty of time for those questions. Please ask your questions at the end of the session, or put them into the chat if you don't want to forget what you want to ask, and we'll get to them at the end of the session. We're going to share today's slides along with any other resources mentioned in a follow-up email, which will likely be kind of Monday. And as I said, the recording link will also be included in that. When I say resources, we have a bundle of policies that we've updated to be relevant to what these changes are, and they'll all be available for you. So we'll include those in an email. So you have them all. You might not need them, you might have done this already, or you might have existing policies and you just use these templates to help you update a few words, but we'll give them all to you. And the final thing is captions are enabled. I think the option to do that is in More in the menu, and then you have the option of either going through language and speech and showing live captions, or doing that through accessibility options as well. So today's webinar is developed and facilitated by SCVO's HR service team. We support voluntary sector employers across Scotland with all things people, whether that's recruitment, performance, reward. We're here to help with all of that. Many of you today, I have lots of familiar faces in front of me, which is really nice. You are either existing HR subscribers or members. If you're less familiar with us, please feel free to get in touch at any time. Our email address is on the screen. And we will also do some quick introductions. So my name is Lorna. I have been with SCVO for 5.5 years. Yes. And have always worked in the HR service. Many of you I'll have spoken to at some point or another, or you might have come along to one of our sessions in the past. My colleague Amy, who is third on the screen there, is not with us today. She's on annual leave, but many of you will also have spoken to her. I'm going to pass along to Caroline and then Kate, who will introduce themselves to you as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Caroline and I'm the head of HR at SCVO. So I look after SCVO's internal HR and I also answer some queries from the HR service. And I'll pass over to Kate.
Good morning, my name is Kate. I'm a new member of HR support team and I'm happy to work for SCVO. Thank you for coming for this session.
Thank you very much both. Okay, introductions done. We are going to move on to today's agenda. We're covering a lot of important information today, but please don't worry if you miss a bit or don't understand a bit. You can follow up with us at any time, either in the Q&A session, or please feel free to email us using that address that you've just seen on the screen, hrservice@scvo.scot, and we can follow up offline. We're more than happy to do that. So first of all, setting the scene. I always like to add a bit of context to our sessions, and today is no different. It seems pretty obvious why we're talking about the Employment Rights Act today. It's new and there's a lot of changes to get our heads around. So this is really just an opportunity for you to get all the information in one place with HR professionals at hand to answer your questions. So we as a team went to the CIPD conference last week, which is the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development, and its CEO, Peter Cheese, excellent name, said this about the Employment Rights Act: the biggest change in employment legislation in a generation. And I wanted to add it into today's session to really drive home how significant the Employment Rights Act is. There's a lot of changes. They have been staggered over 2 years so that employers aren't overloaded with everything at once, but it is still a lot, so you might still feel overloaded. Hopefully today we can help a little bit to get you ready and confident for these changes to come into effect. So the first thing that we're going to do is break these changes down into when they're taking place. And we're going to start with what is happening this year in 2026. So a quick table that we're going to go over, not in much detail because we will delve into that further, but to give you an overview. So the first thing there, paternity leave. Currently, the entitlement requires 26 weeks service. From the 6th of April, this will reduce to the first day of employment. To be clear on that, that is paternity leave, not pay. So anyone taking paternity leave will be entitled to that from their first day of employment, but they will not be entitled to statutory paternity pay until 26 weeks service. That will remain the same. Unpaid parental leave is available after 1 year's service at the moment. From the 6th of April, that will also change to day 1 of employment. So the third point there is the one that's likely to affect all employers in some way straight away. It's statutory sick pay being payable from day 1 of absence. At the moment, there's a 3-day waiting period, with SSP only being payable from day 4 of absence. Many organisations have contractual sick pay, which is paid from the first day or whatever the policy states. But if you only offer SSP, you will now have to pay this from the first day of the employee's absence. There will also no longer be a lower earnings limit, meaning all employees, no matter their earnings, will be entitled to SSP of some kind. So that doesn't mean that they get the full amount of whatever SSP is, but it will mean that proportionate to their salary or their earnings, they will receive some kind of SSP. It's also going to become easier for trade unions to become recognised by employers. Caroline's going to go into more detail about that further into the session, so I won't say much more on it now. The next one there is around the UK government's Fair Work Agency. This also launches next month, and the agency will be responsible for enforcing employment legislation and protecting workers' rights. There's not a whole load of information about really how that's going to work as of yet. We'll wait and see. But it's really for kind of employers the agency are worried about they're maybe not paying the national minimum wage, those sorts of things, that they'll go in and enforce those workers' rights. At the moment, ex-employees have 3 months to make a claim at a tribunal for things like unfair dismissal. That is going to increase to 6 months. So ex-employees will have 6 months to put a claim in at a tribunal if they feel they've been unfairly dismissed or there's some kind of discrimination. And then finally, towards the end of this year in October, employers will be required to take all reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. At the moment, the legislation only says reasonable steps. So adding the word all puts more onus on employers to ensure that they've considered everything robustly. So just that one word in addition creates more of a responsibility. There is a few more months before that is implemented, so again we can help get everyone ready for that, but just considering what more can be done to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. And now for 2027, I will pass to Caroline to talk about that and also what you need to start doing now to get ready.
Yes, thank you, Lorna. So many of the changes that are coming in are part of the UK government's plan to make work pay. And a major aim of this is to reduce insecure work and extend job security to millions more workers. So it is a positive thing, the changes that are coming in. As Lorna mentioned, one of the major changes is the reduction of the two-year qualifying period for unfair dismissal to 6 months. And I'll go into this in more detail in a minute. And the compensatory cap for unfair dismissal awards will be removed at the same time. Dismissing someone, then rehiring them on worse terms and conditions will become an automatically unfair dismissal in most cases from January 2027. And people on 0-hour contracts will have a new right to guaranteed hours in 2027. We don't know exactly when in 2027 yet. It's still to be announced. And they'll also have the right to be paid if a shift is cancelled, moved to another date, or cut short by an employer. And from 2027, employers must provide reasonable notice of shifts and changes to shifts to people that are on 0-hour contracts. So there are other changes, but these are the main ones that are coming in 2026 and 2027. We'll keep you up to date with the other changes as they become more clear. So next, I'm going to run through some of the actions you can take to get ready for these changes, including the reduction of the qualifying period for unfair dismissal, the new requirement around trade unions, and changes to statutory sick pay and family leave. Okay, next slide, please, Lorna. Okay, so as we've just said, one of the most significant reforms is the reduction of the 2-year qualifying period for unfair dismissal to 6 months. So this is to provide earlier employment security for employees, but it also means that employers will have less time to assess new employees before the risk of unfair dismissal kicks in. Plus, the compensatory cap for awards for unfair dismissal will be removed, making it a lot more expensive for employers. So this just means that if you dismiss someone with 6 or more months service from January 2027 without following a fair process, they could claim unfair dismissal in an employment tribunal. And this will apply to new employees from July 2026, as they'll have 6 months service by the time the new right comes in 2027. So these are some of the changes, some of the things you can do to get ready for these changes, to avoid claims of unfair dismissal and to ensure you're giving your new recruits a fair chance. So the first one, make good recruitment decisions. Be clear about what you're looking for, so clear job descriptions, clear job adverts, and follow a fair recruitment process and robust shortlisting and interviews. If you don't have a probation period already, you consider applying a probation period and including this in your new starters contracts. If you do have a probation period in place, have a think about how it could work for you if you reduced that probation period to, say, 3 months. This would leave room for the probationary period to be extended by a few months if you have a new starter and you have concerns about their performance or conduct. Raise concerns about performance, attendance, and conduct early, and hold a formal review around the midpoint of the probation period. If you're confident that things are not going to work out, if there is a performance or skills gap that you just can't accommodate, or misconduct concerns, follow a fair dismissal process. And you can find out more about fair dismissal processes from our HR service and also from ACAS. It is very important that you raise any concerns about performance or conduct early on and provide support to overcome the issues to the new starter. And manage any dismissals fairly and consistently documenting the reasons for dismissal and the steps you've taken to avoid the dismissal. When ending fixed-term contracts of 6 months or over, you also need to follow a fair dismissal process, including consultation and considering alternatives. Fixed-term contracts are quite common in our sector, and they're often connected to funding or to grants. So please pay special attention to this. People on fixed-term contracts with 6 or more months service will be entitled to a fair dismissal process, including consultation and consideration of alternatives. They won't be entitled to redundancy pay. The qualifying period for that is still 2 years. There's no change there. So yes, train your managers, make sure they're aware of these changes and what they mean, and make sure that they're raising any concerns about performance, attendance, or conduct as early as possible. Okay, so I'm going to go on and tell you a bit about the trade union reforms now. So there's a new requirement to let your staff know that they can join a trade union. That's from later this year, October 2026. So this applies regardless of whether you recognise a trade union. And the final regulations are still pending, but from October 2026 or before, if you want to get ready, you should add a standard paragraph to your written statement of employment particulars for new starters, informing them of their right to join a trade union. Update your staff handbooks, and for existing staff, if you send them written communication of their right to join a trade union. And you should do that at least once a year and keep a record that you've done that. So the requirement is to inform staff of their right to join a trade union. It's not to recognise a trade union. There's no requirement to recognise a trade union, but it will make it more likely that you'll get a request from staff or from a trade union to formally recognise a trade union. And once you get that request, then your options are a bit limited. You kind of have to recognise the trade union. And how a trade union gets recognition is on the next slide. So the union must ask you to recognise them voluntarily. If you agree to the request, then the union is recognised. If you don't want to recognise the union and you have more than 21 employees, the trade union can apply for statutory recognition from the Central Arbitration Committee, and they will enforce the recognition if you have more than 21 employees. Organisations with 21 or less staff are excluded from that statutory recognition procedure, so smaller employers have a bit more flexibility here. So we'll be taking questions at the end, so if you do have any questions, write them down or put them in the chat now, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end. And I'm going to move on to cover the statutory sick pay changes now. Okay, so these changes will help ensure that lower paid employees have financial security when they're unwell. So you should review your sickness absence policies and procedures and handbooks and update them to include the new entitlement to SSP from the first day of sickness absence. Remove any reference to the 3-day qualifying period and the lower earnings limit, as these no longer apply. Your policies should include that statutory sick pay will be either 80% of the worker's average weekly earnings or £123.25 a week, which will change on an annual basis, whichever is the lower of those two. And it'll be paid from the first day of sickness absence, the first full day of sickness absence. Eligibility rules are changing, so criteria is now that to receive statutory sick pay, you're an employee and have done some work. That's the wording that's being used. This means that staff on workers' contracts, so staff that work irregular hours or sessional hours, could be entitled to statutory sick pay where they weren't before, if they call in sick for a day that they've been scheduled to work. So you need to communicate these changes to your managers and staff. If you do your own payroll, check that your payroll system has been updated with these changes. And if you do the calculations manually, well done. The main change is that the qualifying days don't apply, or they won't apply any longer from the 6th of April, so you don't need to deduct these days from your calculation. It's important to say that you can, of course, pay more than the statutory minimum for sickness and the other types of leave that we're going to go on to discuss. And this could be a good time for you to consider if you're able to pay more than the statutory minimum, to agree that with your boards and to include that in your policies. Okay, so on the next slide, I'm just going to run through a good absence procedure. So just a quick reminder of how to manage sickness absence. With the changes in SSP, the cost to you as an organisation could increase. So it's becoming even more important to manage sickness absence well. So it's important that everyone understands your absence management procedure, and this is a good time to make sure that your procedure is supportive and provides you as the employer with clear guidance on how to manage staff absences due to ill health. So have a clear, well-communicated absence policy, including how and when your staff should report their absence and how often they should contact you if they are off sick for more than one day. Record absences accurately, including the dates, the reasons, the number of days, and monitor the total number of days. Consider using trigger points as a guide to when absence levels need to be discussed more formally. And stay in contact during the absence within reason. So once a week if someone is off on longer term, and keep conversations supportive and avoid pressurising someone to return to work. Request medical evidence or occupational health assessment to help you understand the reason for the absence and to provide support and understand what adjustments might help. And keep a record of these return to work meetings. Manage long-term absence proactively. So following the steps on this slide, including keeping up-to-date records, maintaining contact, understanding the issue, offering adjustments, requesting occupational health assessments, and consider redeployment if appropriate. Okay, moving on now to the changes in the family leave policies. So ordinary parental leave, paternity leave, neonatal care leave and bereaved partners paternity leave are all becoming day one rights. So you'll need to update your policies, procedures and handbooks and remove any mention of qualifying length of service for these types of leave. So we have a table here on the next slide that sets out the different entitlements. So as Lorna said earlier, the entitlement in most cases is to leave and from day one, not necessarily to statutory pay from day one. So ordinary parental leave is unpaid. There's no statutory pay connected to that. Bereaved partners paternity leave is also unpaid. There's no statutory pay attached to that. Paternity leave and neonatal care leave, there is statutory pay, but you have to have at least 26 weeks service to be entitled to that pay. Workers, so that's irregular workers or people on 0-hour contracts that are not employees, they might not be entitled to this leave, according to ACAS. This is because they don't have to make themselves available for work. They can choose to take time off when they want to. They could, however, be entitled to the statutory pay to cover the times when they've not been available to work, depending on their earnings and national insurance contributions. And this is where things could get complicated, and you should get one-to-one advice about this from STVO's HR service, ACAS, or the Fair Work Agency. So when we're talking about these types of leave and payment for this type of leave, and it's somebody that's on a 0 hours contract, you should take advice about how this applies to them. The Fair Work Agency, which is coming into being next month, this is a new UK government agency. It's very different and not at all connected to the Scottish Government's Fair Work First. The agency will have a role in making sure that organisations pay statutory sick pay, national minimum wage, and that they're using the correct holiday pay calculation. They can also give advice to employers and to your employees. Okay, so a bit more about 0 hours contracts and another change that applies to them. So this is coming in 2027. We don't know when exactly, but if someone on a 0 hours or low hours contract, in fact, works a regular pattern of hours, from 2027, you'll be required to offer them guaranteed hours that reflect an average of the hours that they work in reality. This will be, the average will be calculated over a defined period of time, which hasn't been announced yet, but it's likely that that's going to be 12 weeks. So if you have any staff on sessional contracts where their hours vary every week or a month, that's okay. But if you have staff on those type of contracts and they work the same or very similar hours every week or month, you'll need to offer them guaranteed hours that reflect what they actually work. They can turn down the guaranteed hours if it doesn't suit them, but you will from 2027 have to at least offer them guaranteed hours. And you'll also be required to give reasonable notice of shifts and to pay compensation if you cancel a shift at short notice. Okay, that's quite a lot. So here's just a quick summary of what we've covered. So what you need to do now to get ready. So inform new and existing staff of their right to join a trade union from October 2026. Update your sickness absence procedures, your family leave policies, and later on in 2027, offer guaranteed hours to people on sessional or 0 contracts if appropriate. Communicate the changes to your managers and staff so everyone knows what they're entitled to and everyone knows how important the changes are. And lastly, train your managers. And that's all from me for now. If you have any questions, we'll try and answer them at the end. And I'm going to hand over to Lorna now. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. I am seeing a question already in the chat, which is great. So please do, if you have a question, stick it in the chat so that you don't forget what your question was, and we'll come to them at the end of the session. I am now going to go on and talk about some behavioural skills that are going to help make what Caroline has just spoken about easier, particularly in relation to the reduced time that employees have the right to claim unfair dismissal, so after 6 months rather than 2 years. I've separated these out into 7 skills. So as well as having, good paperwork, having good recruitment, probation, onboarding policies, you also need to consider the soft skills needed to make your own lives easier. So they are clear expectations, regular constructive feedback, confidence in handling tough conversations, fair, consistent and proportionate, keeping an accurate record, empathy but with boundaries, and proactive and decisive. So you're going to be familiar with all of these, and I don't want it to be like I am preaching to the choir, but it can be a good reminder of what's important when major changes like this come along. So please bear with me. There may be some nuggets in there that are helpful for you. So breaking them down further, first of all, clear expectations. So when a new team member joins, has their role been made clear to them? Do your interview questions cover the fundamentals to ensure that you select the right candidate? Have they been given a copy of their job description? It might be a good idea as part of the onboarding process, if you don't already, to remind new starters to review their job descriptions regularly so that they get really familiar with it. If you have to speak to a new starter or an existing employee about their performance, remember to be precise about your expectations. It's not enough to say you need to do better. We're probably all aware of SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. It's a formula that works in various situations, including when we need performance to improve. So I highly recommend applying it here as well. But yeah, being precise, not vague, when communicating the standards that you expect, and documenting expectations in writing. We've mentioned that in a few slides already, and I think I've got a specific one about having accurate records. So we're going to keep repeating that to have a document of what your expectations are if you've had to speak to someone. And then consistency with what is said and what is enforced. So if you've given someone on the spot feedback, or if you've had to have a chat with someone, follow through on what expectations that you've made. You know, if you've had a chat to say, look, we're maybe heading towards performance management here, if we don't see improvement, we have to follow through on that, on what's been said. And that's even more important now that we have less time, from 2 years to 6 months, to work on any issues. Regular constructive feedback. So feedback shouldn't wait for a formal meeting. It's regular, it's in the moment, and it's constructive. If someone's done a good job, tell them how and specifically what was good about it. And if they could do something better or differently, how could they do that better? What was it about it that needs to change? Something that we regularly hear about in the service is getting to the end point of the probation period and not having a clear record or evidence of why it's fair to dismiss the employee if they haven't been performing well or for some other reason. So don't avoid anything. It's going to become more crucial than ever to face into challenging conversations, and you're not doing yourself or anyone any favours by ignoring issues until the last minute. This isn't about jumping on the employee as soon as you notice them doing something wrong, though. It's about making sure everyone is on the same page, so that when you do come to the end of the probation period, there aren't any surprises. So when you're coming to that conversation to say, we're confirming your employment, great, they should already know that they're gonna move on into employment, because they've already had the feedback. They know how they're doing, and if they're not doing so well, they should kind of know to expect, actually, I'm not sure how the probation meeting is going to go. There should be no surprises. The goal is always to confirm employment and pass probation, so we need to consider what support and guidance is available. Reflect on their experience so far. Can you do anything differently, take a different approach, or be clearer with your expectations? It's something I'm saying more and more in the service, as to do some self-reflection. If there are existing issues, what's your part in that? Is there a part in that you've had to play? You know, there are so many different reasons that there could be performance issues within the first few months of someone's employment. So I think it's important to be fair and to offer support and guidance during that period. Confidence handling difficult conversations. So confidence is going to be a big thing here. If you or members of your team are new to being a line manager or a people manager, there are lots of training sessions available, including through SCVO, and they'll be on the events page. Yes, there's a lot to know, and yes, it can feel like it's a lot to take on when you're managing people, but following these pointers really will make your life easier. Inevitably, there will be times that you have to have a difficult conversation, whether that's a failed probation meeting, a performance review, or in the moment feedback. And it's really important that you approach that factually. Emotion should always be left out of it. So that could mean that you take 5 minutes before you have that chat. You've maybe noticed something in the moment and you think, oh, that was frustrating, or something that I need to talk to them about. But if you feel like actually emotions might be part of that conversation, take 5 minutes before you chat to them. Staying calm and objective. And again, going back to my first point, being clear with what your expectations are with regards to improvement. And then being fair, consistent, and proportionate. I'm going to slightly contradict myself here and say, yes, the policy should be applied every time, but we also need to consider the individual circumstances for each case. For example, before starting the disciplinary process for a persistently late employee, have you spoken to them about it? Is there a barrier causing it? Have they got any undisclosed conditions that contributes to the issue? Another point up there is demonstrating reasonable employer behaviour, and this is related. So being reasonable, including hearing the employee's perspective before making any decisions. In formal situations like disciplinaries, this is a must. So it makes sense to apply it in all situations. As we've said before, any decisions are evidence-based, and you have a documented evidence to help you make those decisions, and applying the rules consistently. I've started to say proportionality a lot more in the service. So when you have issues like lateness or absence, so long-term absence, let's say someone has 15 years service and they have been off work for 12 weeks. But you also have someone who's been with you for 8 months and they also have 12 weeks absence. How we apply that policy will differ based on the length of service, just to apply proportionality. For someone who has a longer term service, taking into consideration their previous attendance record, if there's been no issues before this point and now they've been off work for 12 weeks, we need to look at the whole picture before applying the policy. But otherwise, it is consistent to the whole team. And then keeping an accurate record. I can't emphasize enough, and I've said it, and Caroline has said it a few times as well, how important it is to keep a record. I don't mean of every single conversation that you have with your staff. That would be pretty unrealistic. But definitely during the probation period, it's vital to keep notes from your midpoint review and any improvements that you expect. It means that you'll have evidence to back up any decisions that you make. So if you're noticing a trend in performance, there are kind of several instances of things that are happening. And even, doing this positively as well. If there's like a list of things that they're doing really well and you think, actually, this person, potentially has the skills that we have for another role and there's a potential promotion there, having the evidence to back that up as well. All good. Storing action plans, storing probation reviews, and the accounts and records should be fact-based, not opinion. So everything that you have is backed up with observation, with evidence. Empathy, but with boundaries. So we've talked a lot about kind of the soft skills so far, about how we can be the best line manager, be the best people manager you can be. But I think a big part of that is having boundaries in place and having a limit. So active listening before making any decisions. We've just talked about kind of trying to find the root cause with any issues, trying to get to the root of the issue, thinking between the lines, what could be happening that's causing that lateness or whatever it is, and allowing that time to a bit of a grace to allow that employee to speak to you and to maybe disclose something to you that they've been holding back. Showing respect in challenging discussions, like we talked about, removing any emotion from the conversation, being alert to protected characteristics or sensitive issues. So again, when we've talked about applying the policy fairly and consistently, but also being aware of what potential barriers that they are relating to protected characteristics or sensitive issues that you need to be aware of. Of course, when it comes to things like disabilities, it's the employee's choice whether or not they want to disclose things to you. But if there's any chance that you could be reasonably expected to know that there's something going on, then you still then have a responsibility to take action. And we can pick up in more detail relating to that if you want to in the questions. But it's just something to be aware of. And then avoiding assumptions or stereotyping. You know, it's still something that comes up regularly for me, less regularly, and it's great, but stereotyping in the way of kind of assuming that someone's behaviour is just because they don't want to be at work, or someone's performance is, you know, inevitable, or something like that. You know, lots of different stereotyping. Whether that's subtle or not, it still happens, and therefore, you know, being aware of our own biases, being aware of, you know, how we approach a conversation, and removing that stereotyping or assumptions. And then being proactive and decisive. So spotting concerns early, acting decisively with improvement plans, making timely probation decisions, like we've just said, avoiding the last minute panic at month 5. And then I think the thing that I wanted to discuss here is knowing when to reach out to HR for advice. Inevitably, it's just one of those situations where you might find yourself in that situation, because of things outside of your control, that you haven't been able to have that midpoint review, you haven't been able to record everything that is enabling you to then make that decision clearly. That's what we're here for. That's what the HR service, or places like ACAS are there for, to discuss these things with you, and to work through the issue, and to come to some sort of conclusion that works for everyone. So really having an awareness of at what point, and please do, before it gets to the point where you're in crisis mode, get in contact with us so that we can try to avoid anything going particularly wrong. Yeah, you can contact us at any time, and you know, you've got ACAS, lots of different resources as well online that can help with what to do in these types of situations. So I've given you a bit of a whistle stop actually of these soft skills, and I just didn't want to delve in too far, because I know you'll all be aware of them already, but as a good reminder of why it's important in this particular situation. So we've kind of covered everything that we wanted to in relation to what's actually changing, what you need to do, and how you can do it. We're just going to go back and summarise the timeline of everything just before we move on to the Q&A. I've already seen in the chat box that there are quite a few questions, so we'll move on to those. And we're good for time, so we can go through those at a good pace. Okay, so we've just summarised the changes again for you here. Remember, you're going to get a copy of the slides in a few days when we follow up via email. So don't worry if you've missed anything during the session. There's no need to take notes. We'll send all of this to you. As I mentioned at the very beginning, there have been some people who have joined since. We also have a suite of policy templates ready to go with all the legislation updates in place, and we're going to include that in our follow-up email to you. So all of the policy changes that we've mentioned that you need to have in place, we're going to send over policy templates that include all of that, so you can either copy and paste them into your existing policies, use them as a bit of guidance, or use those templates themselves if you do need them. So the table there, we're just going through the trade union activity again. It's got the effective dates of when everything is in place. I'll not go through all of the detail again, but you can see them there at a glance of what's happening and when. And yeah, I think that's us at this point. So